we'll be starting soon. Hello and welcome to the EyeforTravel webinar. My name is Tim Dunstone. I'm the Managing Director of EyeforTravel, and today we're going to talk about how to create the optimal travel customer experience. It seems that finally the web can offer us marketing guys in the travel space the ability to truly personalize our offerings to our consumers. Mobile and data analytics is undoubtedly driving this huge opportunity, but what are the real costs? Both in terms of legality and keeping our customers happy. Can a relatively low margin industry such as travel match these costs? The rewards will be huge for those who get it right. As always, all the players in the supply chain are battling for the trust of their consumers so they can cater the service and service their travel needs. Today we have two experts. We have Jonathan Eisenhagen, Director of Analytics and Insights from Wyndham Hotel Group, and Nathan Richter, Global Director of Client Solutions for Monotake, to discuss this topic. But we want your input too. Please remember to ask questions. You'll see it on a question box on the right-hand side of your screen. And also remember, we are recording this and you'll be sent a copy after the webinar. Right, I would like to try and introduce our first speaker, Jonathan.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Jonathan. I think you're ready to go.
Good. So can you guys see my screen?
Not yet. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Cool. Okay, Tim had asked me to try to winnow down a previous presentation to be only 10 minutes, and in the process I actually made it larger. So I will at some point have to be hooked off the stage. But I have a lot of content. I'll go quickly. I apologize for the speed. I just was not able to edit it down. So anyway, our session has 4 different bullet points of focus: using data sources to provide relevant web offerings in real time, real personalization, how you can personalize your offering, mobile, using multiple data sources to provide the best products to your mobile browsers, and email, how to use reactive and relevant email to drive upselling opportunities. I want to try to focus myself on the first 2 and the 4th of these. And so my agenda is to first kind of get some definitions out of the way. There's a lot of overlapping different terms that get used in this space, and so I want to be clear about how I mean them, whether I'm right or wrong. Then decisions that your company needs to make as you approach optimization and personalization. The methods you can use for data collection, the analysis you can perform on the data, and then some examples of personalization, how you actually do it in real life. So when I speak of customer experience or what they call CX, when I'm addressing that in this context, I mean the universe of all interactions which customers have with your brand. So that can be offline and online. Customization is about the product, so how your product would be changed in response to a given customer's need. Optimization, I would mean A/B testing and improving your offering for all customers across the board. So not necessarily personalization, but making sure that everyone who reaches your site, everyone who interacts with your product has an excellent experience. Segmentation is when you start slicing your customers into different groups according to different segmentation variables. And then personalization is when you take that and kind of do it on steroids. So you get down to where you actually have every individual is a segment of one. So personalization and optimization are very hot topics, and there's an awful lot of buzz about them, but I think before you dive in and invest in many cases, millions of dollars necessary to do it right, it's useful to kind of decide where your brand plays, where your company plays in the space, and what your value proposition is. So if you happen to be a business school student 17 years ago, your strategy professors would have hit you really hard with a book called The Discipline of Market Leaders by Michael Tracy and Fred Wiersma. And their contention was that they looked at different companies that led their packs, providing better rates of return on investment than their competitors year in and year out. And what they found was that they excelled at one of these different areas and not more than one. So they were either great at operational excellence, which is another term for cost leadership, at product leadership, which is self-explanatory, or at customer intimacy, which is the G-rated version of exactly what it sounds like. And their contention is that if you focus on more than one of these things, you end up not being great at any of these things. So you really have to choose one to be the best at, and then be reasonably good at the other two. So with that in mind, you should take a moment to decide, do you want to be like a Walmart, where you are really the low-cost leader, and you can, if it comes down to a price fight with your competitors, you'll be able to beat them. You'll be the last one that's not bleeding red if you get into that situation. Or do you want to be like Stephen Jobs, where he basically kind of told the shareholders and really everyone in that movie to talk to the hand while he went off and innovated products which were very successful. So that method. Or do you want to be like Macy's? I've usually used Neiman Marcus here, but it seems like in the Northeast where I am now, Macy's is very popular. And their tagline kind of sums it up. It's be everywhere, do everything, and never fail to astonish the customer, which if you think about it is exhausting. It's like trying to entertain a toddler. So if you're wanting to sign up for that, if this is the customer intimacy is the differentiating factor that you want to pursue, then you're going to need data. So there are, and actually before we get into the data, I wanted to dive into what we're wanting to use the data for. So let's keep this in mind as we start talking about the data. The main reasons that you want to use data to personalize and optimize on your site are you want to adapt the navigation to different users, or you want to be helping consumers find information, or you want to personalize the presentation of that information, or recommend products or experiences, or provide help and tutoring or education for our customers and be focused specifically on the education that they want in that moment, not on anything else. Or you want to identify relevant communities or support collaboration. So, and in the travel context specifically, that's the environment that I'm playing in, and I assume a lot of you on the call are in that area as well. What we are requested in the online space, at least, is customers want us to remember their keywords. They want us to remember where and when they've traveled from and to, what kind of accommodations they booked in the past. So if they're focused on Motel 6, then don't be pitching them something that's super upscale. They want to know the condition. Want us to know that they want us to condition the offerings that we make to them on their past behavior. And then they want us to make suggestions which go beyond basic requests. So, here's what I've asked for, but if you know something based on your own knowledge of your own product offerings, maybe you would suggest something as well. So, If you happen to be lucky enough to have customers who are willing to freely subject themselves to forms or surveys and will give you honest answers to all of the questions, then congratulations. You probably don't even need to have analysts working for you. You can just present surveys and forms to your customers, they'll fill them out, and then you can go ahead and program your personalization software and your programs to meet their needs. In the real world, 98% of the time, people are not interested in doing that. They want to know what the payoff is for the responses that they're giving. And they will lie freely if they don't have an incentive not to do so. So then you get into other methods of gathering data. The easiest way for you to start collecting data about your customers is usually internally. So you have within your own back office and within your own web tools lots of data which can be used for personalization. So I would recommend that you dive in first to look at your own transaction data and look at what you can tie the transaction data to the customer records that you have. This is something you can either have people do for you, or I highly recommend that if you don't speak SQL, even if you're a marketing person and you have no desire to learn SQL, and that's kind of where I started out, it's just a very valuable language to learn. It will give you a better appreciation for the data. It enables you to kind of get in and see what is possible. You may find tables that have information that can be used in ways you never even imagined in order to improve your personalization and your customer experience. So this is a book that I personally recommend and I hand out to the analysts on my team, which kind of breaks down SQL in easy steps and enables you to learn it if you have a desire to do so. So assuming you're willing to do that or have somebody do this for you, so you start out with your transaction data and then go out to your website. So if you're using Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics, you can pull the data about people's visits. The neat thing about this is that people will reveal a lot more in their visits than just what they're willing to purchase. People will visit and shop an awful lot more than they purchase, just because of financial necessity. So they're going to give a much more complete picture of what they're interested in by their shopping activity on your site. If you're using Google Analytics, the regular generic version, you can't get the data out at a record level, so there's no means of doing that. However, if you are using Google Analytics Premium, Google now offers a connectivity to something called BigQuery, which will enable you to pull the data out of Google Analytics at a record level up to, I don't remember how many millions of records, but there's a limit. But on a once per day basis, you can pull the data into this analytical space, and then you can either analyze it there or pull it into your own database and analyze it from that point. If you're using Adobe Analytics, you can pull in data feeds, or if you're using an Adobe Analytics Premium, you can use something called Livestream and get your data out that way. To that, I would also add your email records. So if you're using ExactTarget or StrongMail or, oh gosh, I think most of the major email service providers provide some ability to punt the sends, the opens, the bounces, and the clicks out of their system and into yours. And so you can pull that together using the email address as a primary key. So this all is internally available data that you can use for your personalization. And you haven't even had to go outside yet. And then finally, there are lots of different vendors who are willing to go outside, and there's several different ones we're evaluating right now at Wyndham, one of which provides 650 different unique data points or data fields, another of which provides 550. So they have all kinds of highly NSA type level, potentially sort of invasive information that they can give you about your customers that can be appended on and give you a much more complete tapestry of a view of what your customers are interested in. So some of these, this is just a brief summary of the 650 or so variables, and obviously you can see there's a lot of different ways you could approach a customer and find ways to attach to these data elements and use that to try to personalize your offering. So once you have the data all pulled together and you got a lot of information on any individual customer record, what do you do with it? Well, there's a lot of different forms of analyses. Data mining in general is defined as the computational process of discovering patterns in large data sets. And there's two different forms of this that I want to focus on. One is when you try to group the customers into different groups based on different data attributes, which is cluster analysis. And then there's another one where you kind of go in open-ended. You don't really say, I want to try to put these people into predefined buckets. You instead say, I want to just see what kind of associations there are among these people that the data themselves present. So if you let's see, one example of the first is, this is called clustering. So this is where you have, what Fisher did in this study is to take a bunch of different flowers. So, and I inject this in because this is sort of a classic of the clustering discipline. So a man named Fisher, a researcher, had a bunch of professional scientists type these different flowers. So three different species of irises. They're represented by these red dots, these green dots, and these black dots. And then he tried to use algorithms which attack the sepal width and the sepal length of these different plants and said, okay, can I, without the help of any experts, without this extra information, can I go ahead and type these different flowers and categorize them correctly? So there's different algorithms you could do. You could say, well, I want to have sort of a straight line algorithm where if the sepal width is greater than a certain length and the width is, or the length is shorter than a certain length, it's going to be the red type. Else it's going to be the green type. And if the length is longer than a certain length, it's going to be the black type. So you can see how that gets a lot of these guys correctly bucketed, but not all of them. You can see some of the ones here are sort of drooling over here. There's a black one over here in the green area. These red ones are over here in the green area. So that's not really perfect. And the people who do algorithms spend a lot of time refining them and trying to find ways that they can categorize people correctly based on limited amounts of information. So practical uses for that are you could use a clustering algorithm to predict the behavior of a site visitor, whether this person happens to belong to a high value cluster when this person hasn't logged in and you don't really know anything about this person other than the first few things you know when someone comes to your site. So maybe what the referring domain was, what the person is searching for in their first search on your site. That can be very revealing and allow you to bucket these people into predetermined buckets. Or you could look at a new purchase list and say, here's a bunch of potential consumers. Are there things about these people which enable me to predict whether they're going to be high lifetime value customers who I'm going to want to market to differently without my knowing a whole lot about them just yet? Another study, and this illustrates the association rules, is something that National Review did where they actually found the beer preferences of different people of different political persuasions. So if you are a highly involved Democrat, you would be up in this corner. An uninvolved Democrat, you'd be down in this. A highly involved Republican, you'd be up in this corner. And a less involved Republican down in this corner. And the cool thing about this, I mean, there's several things that this illustrates. You don't necessarily need to know, does drinking Corona make you a less involved Democrat? You know, probably not. There's probably no causality arrow. We as marketers don't necessarily need to know causality. You know, as long as we can see a correlation where we say, okay, as long as I know somebody looks like this, then I can market to them in a particular way. Or the other way, if I happen to be a caterer, and if I'm going to be catering a party for highly involved Democrats, I might want to be getting a bunch of microbrew beers and not necessarily focusing on Coors Light. So again, we don't really need to know why these correlations exist. We just need to know that they do exist in order to market to people successfully. So if you're interested in finding out about these topics, it used to be that in order to dive into these topics, you had to go off and spend 3 years or more getting a PhD in operations research or stats or something like that. Now it is relatively cheap and relatively, I wouldn't say it's easy. I mean, the subject matter is still very, very difficult. But there are on-ramps that will expose these ideas to you and enable you to kind of use them and speak intelligently to people who are really solid in them. And Coursera, I personally recommend Coursera and the R programming language. So it used to be that you had to have a SaaS license that would cost you multiple thousands of dollars to be able to do this kind of analysis. Now there's a freeware called R that you can find out about. Actually, you can follow links either from this presentation or just Google R, and you can dive in and find out more about this. So once you have your analysis done, there's multiple different ways to attack this. So the easy way to do personalization is via email. You don't have to spend the technological effort to do synchronous responses. You know, the effort or the stress of coming up with a customized response to somebody when they are on your website is difficult and involved. It's much more easy to just kind of slice your data and then kind of sit back and on a casual basis say, all right, so I have a bunch of email I'm going to send out this afternoon. What are some different ways I might slice this group of people into different buckets so that I can be speaking to them in a way that is more relevant to their experience, in a way that's going to get the response rate to be higher. So there's a lot of reasons to start out with email as your first beachhead for personalization. If you want to do that, there's several different examples that I was able to find. I actually looked through my own email inbox and realized that I am not the recipient of any good customized email. which is not, I'm not soliciting people to spam the heck out of me, but I just did not find any that I thought were all that good. So I looked for examples out on the web, and there was a person who was looking through some of the best email messages she had received and why she liked them. This was one of them. She said that it came in the context of she had used a product. I'm trying to remember the specific context. She'd used this product, but she had not really committed to it. So this particular message was not highly subdivided. You see a lot of email messages where every piece of real estate has some element in it that is optimized, and so you have 5 or 6 different things that are competing for your attention. And it may indeed be the one that converts the highest, but it can also tend to drive people a little crazy in terms of how much information they have to digest. So she found this one refreshingly simple. It had a contextually appropriate offer. It did not have something that was a hard sell for a product that she had expressed no interest in. It was a top-of-the-funnel offer, and it was only sent to people who had not downloaded this app yet. So she knew from her own personal experience that this was an app that she had not downloaded. And you know, it can be frustrating when somebody sends you something and it reflects that, oh, this person has not actually, or this person has already downloaded the app. Another example that she had was, this is a behaviorally triggered email message. So she already uses Dropbox, but she did not know about this one particular feature of Dropbox, which now that she understands it is going to make her more resistant to leaving Dropbox and dropping them for one of the competitors. So she said that this was actually really intelligently designed and kind of spoke to her where she was at that moment. And then another one, this is actually an example of association modeling, like that beer example from earlier, that's played out in real life. So Twitter is actually in a uniquely good position to use association rule modeling, because they have so many people who they would say, okay, if you've in this case followed this person, or if you use this, then here are a bunch of other things that people who are like you also enjoy. And she said in this particular example, these were all highly targeted and very relevant to her. She actually liked all of the suggestions that came from this Twitter email message. So if you're willing to go beyond email and get into website customization, that is significantly more difficult. Now this diagram is actually fairly old. I think that some of these architectural components are probably known. I haven't heard anyone talk about Corba in quite a long time, but I haven't been involved with website architecture for a long time either, so I'm just out of that fight. But what you have is you have a browser over here that sends signals to the web server. So there's an application server behind the web server. The web server handles the relationship, the maintaining the session between the browser and the website. And all of the heavy lifting behind the scenes is done by the application server, which actually exists in 3 tiers in a modern structure. So usually what you have now is a presentation layer, which says, you know, what kind of browser are we talking to? Is this a mobile browser where I have to be very parsimonious about what information I put out? Or is it a desktop where I've got lots of space I can play in? And then you've got a business logic layer, and this is where you kind of decide, okay, based on what somebody has sent the request for, you know, what do we want to apply? How do we want to respond to this customer's request? And this is where, if you're going to do personalization and optimization on a per customer basis, this is where value-added services come in, and where if you have a personalization engine, it'll jack into this middle section. And then you have the back section, which for us as travel people is particularly problematic, because, you know, very often somebody might have a particular offer, or they may have a particular request that they're asking of us, and we may need to go back into a legacy database that has our rates or fares or an availability and come back with the appropriate thing that they are interested in seeing and put it on the screen in the order that is appropriate to that customer's request. Well, obviously, if this is an ancient system from back in the COBOL days, it's going to have a hard time talking with the personalization server, the other applications that need to speak with it. And this is where a lot of the expense of real-time personalization comes in. So one example of how you might do personalization in a modern architecture, and Nathan is also on, he'll actually be able to kind of talk about this in the context of Monotate. SiteSpect is a competitor to Monotate, and this is how you could do this with SiteSpect. So the browser of the user has access to cookie data, and the browser pitches this information via a page request to your website. So the web server and the application server receive this request from the browser. Then the request takes the request information and the cookie data down into a personalization engine, and then the personalization engine goes down into an algorithm engine, which is, I don't know, Nathan may have a situation where he actually houses the algorithm. In the case of SiteSpect, they say they usually work with somebody else who's an algorithm provider. And it says, based on all of these pieces of information about this customer, what is the best option of the preloaded options that you have available? for this space, what is the one that we want to give to the customer? And the algorithm engine says, okay, we've got 8 different options. I'm going to choose option number 5, and tells that to the personalization engine, which then passes that to the application server, which then puts that out onto the screen in the appropriate format of the customer. And then the customer makes his or her choice, and they just wash, rinse, repeat. So there's obviously a difficult or complex project, more complex than customizing email, but this is kind of a generalized way of how it can be done, making sure that the responses that you come up with are most appropriate to the customer who's visiting your site. So examples of this, and this is actually not a direct example. This example is kind of cheating because the Guardian offers, the Guardian newspaper website of England has I think they realized that people may get sick of reading all the information that is so popular in the press about the royal baby and the royal family and so forth. So they actually offer customers a royal baby toggle. And this is not simply specific to the royal baby. It actually has other news topics. You can shut out all Republican stuff. You can shut out all Democrat stuff. You can shut out everything related to David Cameron. So you can basically say, I want to see nothing more about this topic. And then they will customize the Guardian site so that it no longer includes that information and presents it to you. So it's good personalization. It's sensitive to the needs of the site visitor, but it actually is putting the site visitor in charge, and it's not really using an algorithm in the background. Another example that I really like is Netflix. So Netflix obviously conditions its recommendations based on what customers are interested in, but they had a problem of saying, okay, who is coming to the site? Is it Jonathan in my case, or is it my wife Jennifer? Now they ask this directly, and so all of the recommendations, all of the ratings that I make, and my viewing behavior is now customized based on who I am, so I'm not getting an awful lot of Downton Abbey and whatever else my wife might be interested in as suggestions whenever I fire up Netflix. And then finally, tragically, one of the best examples in the travel industry space is also one of the ones that got Orbitz pilloried. They found out, or they decided that people who use the Safari browser on the Apple operating system tend to spend more money on themselves for hotels. And so they rationally, I thought, started pushing some of the more expensive hotel results further up the screen than they would for the same customer coming at them via Internet Explorer on a PC. And they got pounded for it in a way that, I was working for Travelocity at the time, so I thought it was hysterical. But in reality, I think that it was a very fair use of the technology. They weren't blocking results out. They weren't taking anything off the screen for the Apple users to not be able to see. They were simply pushing things up the screen that they thought were more relevant, that historically had proven to be more relevant to the Apple users. So I guess the lesson here is you've got to be a little bit cautious about how you use the technology, because you can risk offending people even if you have the best of intentions. So on this topic, I would recommend, this book is a little bit dated, but it has good suggestions about personalization and optimization, the power of one, and I would suggest that you order the one on the left. Nothing against the one on the right, but this is on the topic. Also, there's a book that just came out called Connect, and this is more about customer connection. They had a cool exercise that I recommend you go through where you kind of map the customer process coming into your site and see if you actually are asking the customers to do something at any given point, give information that they're not comfortable giving in order to try to give them the most customized possible response. And then there's another one, Customer Experience 3.0, which I frankly have only managed to skim thus far, but it seems to have an excellent manual on how to customize all aspects of your customer experience, generally website, on the website and off. And so I guess my summary takeaways for this is, start out by knowing the main value that you provide to your customers and spend your money accordingly. Is customer intimacy the main thing that you're trying to differentiate yourself by? If so, then definitely go hog wild on the personalization. It's going to cost you, but it's also going to be recognized by your customers. If not, then think seriously about whether you want to commit those resources. Identify your low-hanging fruit. So learn as much as you can from your own data inside your own house before you start going outside and spending money on vendor data. And then do the simple stuff, which, and I would recommend, email is an obvious example of that first, and then kind of wade into the deeper waters from there. And then also, and this benefits anyone, adopt a customer-centric point of view. Audit your organization's customer centricity, kind of understand your organization as seen from the customer in all the different facets. Subscribe to your own email distribution. See if you're spamming people to within inches of their lives, or if you're treating the customer's attention as a valuable resource that needs to not be overtaxed. And then finally, understand your customer's goals and manage your customer relationship as a scarce resource. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was That was really impressive and done at record speed. Well done. We're going to move on to Nathan quite quickly, but one question I have. You mentioned the legacy systems providing the data source. Is there any sector in our industry, I know you're a hotelier, but across our industry, which is going to be impacted on this more? Do the GDSs, do you have any information on that?
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning of your question.
Sorry, you mentioned the legacy systems providing a data source. Yeah, and the great expense there. Is there any one sector which is going to be impacted more, or is there any sector which might have more, might be able to do this more easily because they're not linked to these legacy systems?
Yeah, I think the OTAs have an advantage. I mean, in terms of personalization, they get to see people's behavior across multiple different product categories. They have their own sort of separate systems, and they do have to tie back into GDSs generally in order to get their availability and content. But I think that I believe that is going to be easier for them to do generally than for other folks with legacy systems.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Jonathan, thank you very much. Hope you can listen on, and I'm sure some more questions will come through. Don't forget, anyone out there with a question, use the use the table on the type box on the right-hand side to add your questions. And now we'd like to move on to Nathan Richter. He's the Global Director for Client Solutions for Monetate. Nathan, are you there?
Great, yes, thanks, Tim, and yeah, awesome job, Jonathan. I'm going to have to circle back to that beer chart and see what that has to say about my midterm election voting.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Nathan, yep, get started when you're ready.
Yep. So hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Again, I'm Nathan Richter, Global Director of Client Solutions here at Monetate, and as Jonathan alluded to, we are a personalization marketing platform. And what we really do is tackle some of the challenges that Jonathan had highlighted in terms of the ability to understand that data about your customer. So whether that's first-party data you have locked away in maybe your back-end CRM or customer profile, understanding some of the second-party data, which may be the data you're inherently seeing in session or stored in a cookie or in your analytics, and then even to the third party, which is possibly getting some of that DMP or other external data sources that do give you some of that psychographic or additional information. And then the key thing for us is obviously how do you then make some meaningful change to your site so that you can start to get to that one-to-many and ultimately one-to-one experience of changing your website or your additional presences. With that being said, we believe that it is important to meet the customer where they're coming to you. So obviously the behavior changes a bit whether they're in the email, on your website, or coming in from a mobile device. And our technology allows you to interact with the customer in those three different spaces. A little bit about who we work with on the client side. We work across our verticals, including retail, financial services, media, but do have an inherent impact and interest in the travel sector. We do work with a lot of carriers and brands specifically. As Jonathan alluded to, there's often an opportunity to help accelerate some of that technology change by bringing our SaaS solution to the carriers themselves and helping accelerate how they can make some of these offerings come to be. So kind of as a backdrop to what I'll go through is, indeed, we all recognize that the customers are expecting smarter, more relevant experiences in every interaction, and I think we've seen more recently that a lot of this is being driven by the explosion of the mobile experience. So really, it's that expectation or that interaction from a consumer through multiple touch points. And when you think about this, the experience is obviously very different whether it's a mobile device like we see here, a tablet, or a desktop experience. And for us, we run some data and are monitoring this very closely because obviously this has a huge impact on where should we be focusing our resources as it comes to understanding the customer and understanding what they might be doing from a process or conversion perspective on the different devices. So as you can see, this is Q2 to Q2 2012 to 2013. We just released brand new data for Q2 2014 that is showing an even bigger growth as it relates to the tablet and smartphone devices. The smartphone traffic is now the second biggest piece and has also overtaken tablet in terms of revenue. Certainly a tablet at this point still has a higher conversion rate or booking rate, but does not have the overall revenue impact just due to the vast numbers that are on the smartphone or the mobile device. And why is this important for us as marketers? Well, what we found, and we did this in partnership to get some additional data, but what we found is that people with these multiple devices, and specifically as that relates to smartphone and tablet, are what we call the digital elite traveler. And really what that means is they have more interaction and more touch points with you as a brand, which gives us, the marketer, more opportunities to obviously speak to them where they're at in this process. And ultimately that matters because, as you see here, close to 30% higher spend is through what we're calling these hyper-connected travelers, people who have multiple devices and through their research or booking process are interacting with you as a brand in these different devices and at these different touch points. So it's really important that we understand how does this process work. And so as marketers, we really take the first step of sort of taking a step back and saying, looking at your, let's say again, your research and booking process from as a new customer from the beginning, what is that journey that the customer is going through to research and ultimately book for your service or for your experience? And so it's really mapping what that is and knowing the customer in terms of how do we identify what their behavior is historically and also in the moment, so as they're maybe giving you inputs on the site. Certainly location and time, whether or not they're a loyalty member, and even the weather are things that we can understand that are going to give us some context to who the customer is and how they're interacting or what they're looking for on your site currently. And certainly I think Jonathan had laid out an expansive process that is very technically challenging, but certainly our technology and other technologies similar to us, we're trying to allow that information to be accessed in a much more nimble and agile way, whether it's in the browser or in real-time calls, as we can obviously experience and understand what are people implicitly asking for in terms of maybe where they're departing, where they're going, the number of travelers, certainly what the real-time weather or time is. These are things that now can be understood and realized and acted upon in real time as your customers are traveling through your site. So certainly understanding those elements about the customer. And then what? Putting that context around, are they interacting with you via a desktop or mobile experience, because certainly that's going to impact innately what is the type of experience they're looking for. Certainly you can't have a detailed explanation or complicated content that might be difficult to read on the device. It might be a time to really look at what are calls to actions or simplifying things as it relates to the mobile experience versus desktop. And then when. I think this is a really interesting piece that we'll show some additional data on here in a moment. But there really is as organizations that we work with, we understand that there is, in essence, a mapped out journey of how long it takes people to research and then at what point they're buying or converting and booking as it relates to their ultimate travel or departure date. And these are really important things to understand so that, again, you can be presenting your customer with some more relevant information or detail and meeting them where they're at in the cycle. And certainly the last piece is ultimately what then can we help them do within that session so that they're getting the right information and able to take a step further with you as a brand in that buying cycle. So as I touched upon, we'll kind of break down some of the different elements of the research and booking process and then show some examples of maybe how you can look to modify some elements of your site, whether it relates to your mobile or desktop experience. So in the search, how much time are travelers spend researching their trips? As you can see, the proportion are doing it within a couple of weeks, and I think that's important. Again, this isn't necessarily time to departure. This is how often are they coming to your site, interacting with you, and doing that research to understand what's the best price, what's the availability and timing. And so again, generally speaking, you can now understand you have some time to interact and gain the confidence of these consumers. For us, one of the things that we find is really important is your site, again, is set up to communicate probably several different things to several different types of customers. So certainly here you have the main hero that is calling out what is most likely the loyalty program. In the bottom left is a weekend getaway for couples or potentially singles. And then certainly in the middle module, there's something around family. So trying to be a catch-all for all types of consumers. But the reality is a lot of times we're getting this information upon entry that can help us curate this content. So on the left you see the BBC website, the online booking banner that is really promoting that family essence. And so when somebody clicks through, as opposed to the earn up to 35,000 bonus miles, the ability to be nimble and recreate your home experience using, again, the elements you've already promoting, but now making the family vacation the more prominent, or what we would say is the consistent message that's really understanding great. You've shown an intent coming from some of our external acquisition programs around family, therefore let's make sure the family component is most prominent as a CTA when you come to the site. So helping speak consistently to the consumer. As it comes down to getting closer to the booking process, again, here you can see that folks are generally booking all the way up to a couple months in advance of their trip. Certainly business travelers may fall in a different category from here, but as you can imagine, as you go up this spectrum, what we've seen is folks who have business models or services that take these, that have this more advanced booking model, certainly the value can tend to be higher. And the value is higher for a couple of reasons. One, they're doing more research, they have more elements that they need to take into account before making that decision. And two, that really does provide us some additional, as marketers, some additional time to potentially curate their experience or their vacation in advance and add some additional components. So with the backdrop of the booking, once you know somebody is in that time, let's say you know as a business, an airline's a good example, the best fares are still traditionally 2 weeks in advance, so that 2 to 4 weeks is kind of right in the sweet spot. If you recognize somebody's coming in with travel dates in that realm, you can have that assumption that their intent is higher to book. And so certainly from a mobile device, what you can do to cleanse or clarify that funnel process and keep the visitor focused is something that is very quick and easy for you to test as it relates to kind of an optimized experience at a very macro level. So looking at ways to clarify the funnel when you know somebody is in that booking zone is really a great way to get started testing out how you can have a bigger impact on your bookings. I alluded to upsells and cross-sells, and really as carriers and certainly OTAs as well, this is really the opportunity to get that number going back to the digital traveler that's about 30% more. That connectivity allows you more opportunity to speak to that customer, and in this case, somebody who's potentially already booked. So whether it's through email communication or, again, frequent visits coming back to the site, even in an application, you have an opportunity to be more relevant and provide additional value to the traveler as well as revenue to you, the brand or the carrier. So here you see it's broken up by the different sectors of airlines, hotels, and car rentals. But the interesting thing is, when are people then more inclined to potentially be open and responsive to the upsell and cross-sell? Certainly during that shopping process, it's a very good one. But I want to call, if you do the two middle ones, the just after booking and the after booking but before departure, if you combine those, in all cases, it's either equal to or greater than the second largest chart here. So what we really see is an opportunity after somebody has booked that travel, knowing that often it is more than 2 weeks in advance, you now have a nice runway to be able to give more relevant information. And this, again, is really being driven, we're seeing, by devices. So the fact is you have these different touch points where, again, as you see, it's pretty even, but there are really 3 bites at the apple, we would say, to give potentially valuable upsells and valuable revenue opportunities to you as an organization. A good example, we worked with a major airline, and we're all familiar now with, certainly there's a base fare, but there are different ways that, as we would call it, sort of bundles that give you additional value attributes about your travel. So whether that's sitting in the bigger legroom area, getting bags, certainly double miles, or even just being in a better boarding zone so that you'll be able to get your carry-on. This was a great piece that was done by the Wall Street Journal that actually aggregated all of the domestic North American carriers and said, here are the different things that they're putting out there and actually whether or not they thought it was of value. And where we think this was important was we actually took this with one of our partners and said, not only do we want to realize what's the best message, but certainly for different types of travelers, there's probably a different value proposition. So to the point of understanding at a more, not even a one-to-one level, but you can think of this as a one-to-several level, we started to test what the different value messages would be. So when we looked at the audiences by 3 different ways, one was quick trips. So in other words, they weren't traveling for more than 3 days. We had a message that was based on bonus miles, free bags, or the change fee. And for that quick trips, which makes a lot of sense because that's probably business travel, the change fee being the most valuable that proposition was what actually drove the most conversions. On an international trip, the assumption actually going in was that the free bags would be the winner on that one, but it turned out that the bonus miles were the most valuable element there, and you can see the impact. And then to the loyalty members, we were able to isolate once somebody had authenticated. Again, within the browser, you can quickly and easily identify whether somebody's in your loyalty program, and even to the level or tier that they're in. The bonus miles, very impactfully, almost 30%, helped drive greater bundle uptake. So this is a great example, as Jonathan alluded to, kind of that spectrum of growth, of not just testing what might be a good message across the whole site, but really taking the time to understand what the different audiences, how that can mean not only benefiting your consumer, which is our goal, but in this case also providing that extra revenue that obviously helps as well. And so for us, one of the things we always try to say is it's not so important that you have all of your, a one-to-one program architected from beginning to end before you start this. It's really important that you take time to just understand where can you come into this and start to make impact. So the first thing we certainly recommend is, work with other members in your organization to understand what is that customer journey of a booking. Certainly understanding the device so that you can have that context is going to help. But don't wait. Get started with whatever you can make a change to. Maybe it can only be a single page to a new versus returning customer, but that's going to help you get down the path of learnings that will ultimately validate that you're kind of going down this personalization path that's providing value, and that'll be really what you can evangelize internally to get more resources, more capabilities to expand your program maybe to other ways that you can meet the customer, as we showed earlier. And then ultimately, this is about making a better experience for the customer. So certainly we want to drive revenue, but the importance here is how do you build that relationship, build that trust by meeting the expectation of your consumers and giving them a more personalized experience. So hopefully that was helpful. That's my portion. Thanks for your time today. It was a great session.
Thank you, Nathan. That was wonderful. Just looking through your presentation, it was very in-depth. Which sectors within the travel sector are really using your technology? Because as we alluded to before with Jonathan, I think what is going to stop the industry doing this is the different price points involved. Do you see any particular type of company, so an airline company, an OTA, or a hotel, any of them really taking advantage of this more than the others?
Yeah, as I kind of alluded to on our slide with some of our logos, we really find that the carriers are very open to this. In a lot of cases, they are making the investment in technology to, in many ways, try to catch up with the OTAs. Since the OTAs are in some ways kind of purebreds in the online and digital space, in certain respects, they can have a bit of a leg up in terms of capabilities for technology. So working with the carriers and airlines and travel for us has really been powerful in terms of the results we've seen. And again, a lot of it comes back to this, the amount of information that a customer is giving you just in a natural booking or search process, and then being able to apply that to kind of the journey that you're expecting in terms of coming back, learning more, booking, and ultimately having a chance to upsell them with additional services or value from again, you, the carrier. But we do see it on the carrier side primarily.
So you're essentially seeing yourself as allowing the travel suppliers to retain customers for longer. Yeah, that's the goal. And how about the new players on the block, such as the Airbnbs? Do you think, because obviously they were grown and developed in a time when data analysis was really coming together. Do you think they have a significant advantage, or do you think they're losing that?
I think the advantage often that we see the newer sort of brands coming on is they have an advantage in data. And it really goes back to sort of what Jonathan had highlighted, which is basically the way they're tracking and storing their data is much more accessible to make these changes. They certainly still have some challenges as it relates to personalizing the site in different ways, but the foundation of that being the different data they can see about the customer, they certainly have that in a much more accessible manner than we find a lot of the travel suppliers do.
Because of their lack of legacy systems and so on.
Correct, correct.
Okay. All right, Nathan. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was 2 fantastic presentations. Don't forget, we will be emailing everybody the presentation, I think, by tomorrow afternoon. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. And any questions, do send them through to us, and we'll send them on to the panelists, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.